Congrats. You have gotten through all of the cowork lessons and we are on to code. Now, Claude Code seems very scary. And I'll admit, for me, someone that's not super technical, definitely far away from software engineer, it took me a little bit to kind of gain confidence, get the ropes, and learn the ropes on Claude Code. But once you understand the fundamentals and you have, say, that light bulb moment on, wow, this is super helpful, it gets very addicting. It's like a video game where you're just seeing everything in your mind come to life as far as like as part of web apps or landing pages and websites with your words. So before we get into actually building, because this module, the lessons within Claude Code, will be me actually building out landing pages and web apps so that we can do this together and you can see the real time interaction that I have with Claude Code and how to kind of debug, because you will run into little blocks here and there, and ultimately how to build something that's live. Before getting into all that, I want to touch on some of the fundamental key terms for Claude Code, which I've compiled. There's 15, 20 of them. I'm just going to go through them one by one so that everything from here on out will be a lot easier to understand once you have those building blocks and that foundation in place. Let's dive into these terms, starting with CLI, which is Command Line Interface. It's a fancy way of describing what Claude Code is. It runs on your own computer and it connects to a server via an API. So you can think of Claude Code as a CLI. Vibe coding is something maybe you've heard thrown around, and it's exactly what we're going to be doing. It's essentially using your words to develop web apps and landing pages and have your visions in your mind come to life through essentially coding without the use of actual code. API is something that allows for Claude Code to talk to HubSpot or to talk to Figma or Zoom. It's a way for two softwares to talk to each other through a line of code. And so you'll see that we're going to actually be using a ton of different APIs to connect our web apps to certain tools and interfaces. API key is that. It's the key. It's a string of random letters and numbers that you input into a tool like Claude Code so that it can then start talking to that tool that provided you with that API key. Request response is really just the two sides of that API call. So, you send a request with those instructions, and then the server, so the tool like a HubSpot or the Zoom, will send back a response. JSON is going to be, as it says here, most common format for sending and receiving those APIs, and it'll look something like this here. Git is a versioning control system that tracks all the different changes that you're making to your web app and code over time. And the most popular form of this is GitHub, which most in the engineering and software community use, and something that you will be using in Claude Code to manage all those different versions of the apps and everything that you're building. Now, git ignore is really important. This basically tells GitHub to not publish any of this live. It should stay locally, or it should just be excluded entirely. These are things like your secret keys, dependencies, things that you don't want others to get access to. So you'll tell Claude and really in Git to ignore those from being published. Repo is a project folder that's going to contain all of that code. And to add all of that code and make it live and make it work, even whether it's locally on your computer or live on a website, you need to commit that code, and that's called it's called a commit. Now, a branch is, say, if you have your live website or your live web app, and you create a branch where you're working on all the different changes that won't affect the original, say, root. because it's a branch, and then you can eventually merge that branch into the root of, call it the tree in that whole analogy, and it'll merge and make that live once you've got that branch merged in. Environment variables, and you're doing really well. There's only a couple more left here. Environment variables are going to be secrets like API keys. These are typically in the git ignore. These are not anything that you want to be publishing out into the open. And then you've got NPM and NPX. These are package managers. Great example of this is Claude Code is installed via NPM. Not really going to be using that one too much. That's why it's down below on this list. But still important to know because you'll see this thrown around. And then you've got localhost. So this is a reference to your own computer as a server. Usually when you're building out a new web app or a landing page, and you'll see this when we go through and start building things, it's going to be previewed on our computer locally through a URL that looks something like this. Now, once you publish it to the web, it'll have a URL that we're more familiar with, right? Typically, you'll go to a website like a google.com or yahoo.com. But before those are getting published and the developers are working on these websites, they're typically working on a local file on their computer that they're previewing with a link like this. So that's all for the key terms. I want to get straight into building because I'm a big believer, and at least personally, I feel like I learn a lot more just by doing or watching someone do something. So we're going to build some really cool applications and dive straight into it.